New reporting from the Texas Tribune is raising urgent questions about immigration enforcement, oversight, and human life inside federal detention centers. In the span of 6 weeks, 6 people have died while detained in Texas ICE facilities, 3 of them at Camp East Montana in El Paso. Luann McCreel is one of the reporters covering this story for the Texas Tribune. She's joining us now. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
You know, while people may have heard about 1 or 2 of these deaths, they likely did not know that this many people have died in such a short amount of time. I want you to walk us through your process to report and find out about these deaths.
Yeah, I mean, it was shocking to us as well. And I think, part of the context of this is that we know that the Trump administration has ramped up interior enforcement because border crossings are so low. So these are a lot of folks being detained now who many of them have lived in the country for years, may have, American citizen children. And what has happened is that in the past year, we've seen this spike in deaths across the country, more than 30, which is the highest in more than 2 decades. And in Texas particularly, it's been 6 in 6 weeks, as you noted. One, which was the most shocking, that was ruled a homicide involving staff at this troubled detention center in El Paso. So we took federal data, spoke to many lawyers and, some of the immigrants that were involved to try to understand what was going on here.
So, yeah, you mentioned that death that was ruled a homicide because the medical examiner's office was called in. I'm familiar with, we told our viewers about just yesterday another death that happened, and they were taken to a military facility instead so that the county was not involved. Does that make it harder to find out about what's happening? What does that do to transparency?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a big part of the question here is the lack of transparency. I mean, for example, in that death that was eventually ruled a homicide, initially ICE said that it was a suicide attempt. So the fact that it was a homicide involving staff, which experts told us is extremely unusual. A former ICE director said that she had not encountered something like this to her knowledge in 15 years of serving under 3 administrations, including the first Trump administration. So, I think the fact that that man's, the autopsy is now possibly not going to be public is very troubling because we don't know if it was a suicide. That's what the government claimed in this case that was ruled a homicide, but we don't know what the autopsy will say if we can't see it.
Some of the other deaths, were any of them natural causes or something perhaps that was not suspicious?
Of course. I mean, I think in fairness, a lot of people cycle into ICE detention facilities. There are more than 200 across the country, right? And many of these people may not be in good health, just when you're talking about any correctional facility. So, some deaths are due to natural causes. I think the question is the lack of transparency, because the ACLU and other groups did this exhaustive study that we quote in our piece and found that some deaths that ICE claimed to be a natural cause could in fact have been prevented had there been better medical care. So, I think the question for viewers and readers of the story is, these are not people that typically have been accused of crimes beyond civil immigration offenses, but they seem to be dying now at kind of record spate compared to previously.
Yeah, and those offenses, civil offenses, we should also point out. I want to ask you, you did have the opportunity to talk to some former ICE agents. What did they tell you about these conditions and what's happening?
Well, what they said, and these were people, kind of high-placed people who oversaw ICE in various capacities over the past 3 administrations, like I said, including, the first Trump administration, that, ICE to be clear, it's always, just as in prisons or jails, it is always complicated to provide the best medical care for this population. But now, what is different is that the Trump administration is so rapidly expanding this population. They're talking about opening, a dozen or more warehouses, several of them in Texas, that will be even larger than the troubled El Paso camp. And, the deaths are increasing, complaints of poor medical care are increasing. And again, these are not people that, for the most part, are accused of actual crimes beyond their immigration offenses. So, what those former officials said is that this is predictable. If you're going to expand at such a rapid pace and you're going to cut oversight, this is what's going to happen. People are going to die.
A heavy, heavy statement for them to have made. People can find more from your story at the Texas Tribune's website. We thank you so much for taking some time out to talk with us today.
Thank you for having me.